I think communities are a rich tapestry of different talents, abilities, and I think just with any family, you fall out, you have disagreements, but you all come back together again because you recognise that you're all part of the same beings as well. I think quite often in our community, we often forget that we're all our family, and despite our different views and perspectives, we must be respectful and civil towards one another. So just like any embryo or any kind of living organism, it goes through a journey, it goes through a process, goes through good moments and good moments, good and bad moments in time of its growth. And I think community very much embodies the families that we all come from, that we all aspire to be part of in the future.
Thank you. Shan. I think I'll follow on from that, actually, in terms of the family, but also unity. And I think it's an opportunity. Community brings opportunity for us. And I think what community ultimately is what we make of it. And it is about collectivism and responsibility and all being responsible for each other and the issues that are faced within the community. There's strengths, there's weaknesses, there's going to be challenges, but I think ultimately we can all pull together and do things. And I think sometimes we don't understand the power that lies within a community. But once we find that power, there's so much more we can do collectively rather than on an individual basis.
Keep it very simple. I believe it's a team and network that empowers one another. Iron sharpens iron. We're meant to empower and bring forth change amongst all of us.
Thank you, Ophelia.
I think I want to just look at it through the lens of my work. I work in ecumenical affairs, and ecumenism comes from the Greek word oikumene, which means the whole. It speaks of the whole of creation, but it also speaks of individual communities. And when one thinks of oikumene and the whole, we immediately are implying that within that whole are many sub-stratas. It's a complex whole that you're trying to bring together, to work together for the benefit of all.
Yeah, I wanted to use Greek words as well, but I forgot about it now, so please forgive me. I think that when we deal with the issue of community, we have to understand that community is made up of families. And if the family value is broken down, the community will be broken. So hence we have to break it down to a smaller sphere, where we say that community must espouse the fact that there's values that must come from the home. And if that values is then in the home, it will then flow out to the communities. Hence we have to deal with the family first.
I thank you. Give them a round of applause. And to the point, appreciate it. Now we are doing this in a way, a little bit like Question Time. If you're familiar with Question Time on BBC Television, BBC One, currently hosted by Fiona Bruce, then we have that ilk to what we're trying to do this evening. We have got questions that we're going to put to the panel now on three main areas. There are guests in the audience as well that have been chosen beforehand to ask particular questions of the panel, or also to put their point of view across as well. So the first question that I'm going to be putting to our panel, and I'm going to start by asking Councillor Sharon for you to start with that. Would you, actually panel, I need to check with you, are you happy to be called just with your first names? Yeah, great, excellent, thank you very much for that. So, the first question I want to put to us all as an audience, but in particular to start with thoughts from our panel. A report by Shelter in November 2018, approximately 320,000 people across Britain are homeless, according to that report. Here in Birmingham, that is 1 in 73. What is Birmingham then, as in Birmingham City Council, doing to house or to work with the homeless situation? Sharon?
Big question.
It is, very much so.
So I think there's, you have to put into context there's different types of homelessness. You've got the rough sleeping side, then you've also got families that are facing homelessness at the moment. And the approach that I really promoted to take was actually, rather than it just being the council, it's a citywide approach So we have partners that we work with, like St Basil, Shelter, there's a whole host, and they're our commission services and they deliver different things. And that's around things such as mental health, that's such as temporary accommodation. But I think the difficulty is some people, when they're homeless, are just not ready to engage with different services, and some people are more so. I think the biggest challenge for us is the fact around house building, because we don't have enough properties in the city. And when I put into context homelessness within Birmingham, we have on average 600 new applications a month of homelessness, which is the equivalent to filling 4 20-storey tower blocks. So we have Housing First coming on for temporary for rough sleepers, so they can actually be given a property, a proper tenancy, and then we wrap the service all around them. So that's for those ones. And again, there's a number of charities, organisations that we're working with, and ultimately what we set up is around the prevention side, because at the moment, the way societies were operating in a point of crisis, and we need to be also looking at prevention. So in terms of prevention, we've got eviction panels to stop people from becoming evicted, whether they're housing association or councils. We're doing work with the private rented sector, because a lot of homelessness comes from private rented sector on secure tenancies, and we've just opened up a new domestic violence hub, so that those that are suffering from domestic violence, that are fleeing that situation, they can get specialist support and directed with specialist people.
Thank you for that, Sharon. I suppose some of the other question is, when people think of homelessness, as we said, on the streets of, for us here in Birmingham in particular, around the city centre, we're seeing a lot more, what I must think is the begging, that people are being approached, and they're in anywhere from Grand Central through Her Street, under the, well, where the old library was a main hub for lots of people homeless. So I suppose there's an element of, and please, we have runners, so if you do want to share a point, put your hand up and we can take note of it. How do you address that problem? Because there's always that question of, should we give them money or do we give them food?
Okay, the way that I always say in terms of, it's not for me to tell people how they're going to spend their money, that's the starting point. But what I always say to people is I give this story. I mean, my background is I used to live in St Basil, so I was a homeless teen myself, so I kind of understood all of that. And we really have to work with where people are at. Some people who beg are going to be homeless, and some people who beg are not going to be homeless. And there's a huge difference in that. Now, I knew someone who I supported for nearly 3 years who wasn't ready to engage in services, but we continued to support him. He didn't sign on, he didn't have a job, he had no money. All of his money came from the public. He died, and he died from an overdose of Black Mamba, which is a drug that's out on the streets at the moment. The Black Mamba in the city centre can cost anything, it's like a currency, and it can move from anything from 50 pence to £2. So £2 is what could have ended that guy's life. Now, it's easy to give someone £1 and £2 and we don't think nothing of it. We don't know how that's going to be. So me personally, I will buy someone a sandwich, I will ask them how they're doing. And I know that there's a number of voluntary groups out there that do go out and feed people. So there's opportunities there. But what we are going to be doing in June, because we set something up called Change into Action, where members of the public could donate money, their change to that, and 100% of the money would go to actual rough sleepers. So we're going to be launching in June some contactless points. So if people are walking around and they want to make a donation, they can actually keep their contactless, and make donations that way.
Thank you for that. Let me turn to you, Joe, and to Wayne, because of your role in the church. And of course, our conversation this evening, in a way, is what does the church do when it's seen homelessness? And for many people, they see the church as a money-making, you know, people go there, they're looking pretty, they've got all their pretty clothes on, and yet they will happily walk past somebody who hasn't. What would you say is a church response when they're seeing the homelessness on the streets? Yes, Joe, if you start first.
I think the compassion that Jesus talks about is something that we should wear always, wherever we go. So in terms of the person that I pass on the street, I tend to give them some money. I often don't have cash, but when I do, I would tend to give something. I remember a couple of years back, I saw there was a person who was begging on the streets, and I told him I didn't want to give them the money, so I said, come with me into the shop. It was on Soho Road, actually. So I went into the shop, the Caribbean food shop, and this man bought the whole shop. And I thought he was just going to have a patty or something like that, not a bit of it. I think it come to like £30 by the time he'd finished giving. So sometimes you get a bit stunned, but to be truthful, I mean, the £30 for me was not a big issue, but it probably says something about both his graviliciousness and my generosity at the end of the day. But I think it's important that at the point of need, that we address that need without looking too deeply about whether or not this person is being exploited or something, especially for money that you can afford to give. So that's my first response, is to be generous and to have a spirit of generosity. But moving up further the chain, I mean, I'm a co-president of Housing Justice, and I work quite closely with the London Refugees Forum. And their plan is to try and make provision for the homeless, and they do it in different ways. Just the other day in Birmingham and in Aston, I was close to a group of churches that set up a respite system in a chain way. So a group of homeless people would sleep in one church hall on one night and be fed and clothed, and then the following day another church would pick up the tab, and the following day another church would pick up the tab there. So there are churches doing practical things to try and help. The church work, obviously, that I am a member of for life, years ago saw the need to set up Nehemiah Housing Association, for example. Big shout out to Nehemiah. And that work has been going on. They'll soon be celebrating their 30th anniversary since that started. So I think the church is doing various things both as individuals and also as things. The last thing I want to say, Nikki, is this, that I think that sometimes people's expectation of the church is exaggerated as to how much it really can do. It can be part of a system that seeks to address the issues, but I think it is wise to limit how much we think churches can actually do to help. And in that regard, I'm not saying there's not more that can be done, but in that regard, I know of many churches up and down this nation, individuals and churches who are doing quite a bit. I would encourage us to do more.
Thank you for that, Joe. Wayne, you're our international guest as such, and so they're in Johannesburg and parts of South Africa, which over the years, in terms of the footage we've seen from a media standpoint, was just the shanty towns upon shanty towns and the dilapidation in the areas and the homelessness there. But the link that you have with the organisation, and in particular here with UJ, they recently have given out over 100 food parcels. Is that part of the work that you also do, or churches would be doing it that you know of in South Africa?
Let's give a little bit of statistics with what happens in the neck of our woods. 55.5% of South Africans are living in poverty. 2.3 million people are homeless, and the stats is growing, waiting for houses in our area. Part of what's killing our country is leadership. Where there's no good leaders to lead, the country will be morally corrupt because of our leaders that have been stealing money. And so when the church addresses these issues, let's be real about it. Let's be real about these issues from a church perspective. The issue with the church is that we don't have a plan. The church needs to have a plan. If New Jay is working in Birmingham, I'm working in Boxburg. The question is, what is my plan as a church collectively to address the homeless issue, people living on the street, because the church can make a difference in those areas. But we must come up with a plan.
Yes. I hesitated and I thought you were going to have some more. I know, Shine, you wanted to come back in, but let me just hear from Ashley and Derek, whether or not you've got an opinion on it, but just more so possibly just a person of the community. seeing homelessness. Ashley, you're one of the younger members here on the panel. You're seeing a lot of your peers do what we call the sofa surfing, and that's the invisible homelessness. In your experience and just hearing what's going on, what's your thoughts on Birmingham's approach in particular to homelessness here for us?
Well, firstly, this is most certainly a national issue, not just a Birmingham-centric issue. And, you know, as Birmingham is the youngest city in Europe and the West Midlands is the youngest region in the country, it just, you know, it bears facts that a lot of our young people, unfortunately, are prone to being homeless and lost sleep because of issues around austerity and lack of provision. And certainly from my perspective, and I've got a few friends who have been homeless and have been rough sleepers. I think more needs to be done to tackle some of the root causes of why some young people become in that position. And certainly mental health is a huge issue, not only for policing, but all of our public services. And I think more needs to be done to invest in mental health provision. Once you are able to tackle some of the reasons why young people feel disaffected or disenfranchised or feel that they don't have a stake in society, you then start to build up their self-esteem and their confidence and their awareness of their situation and their surroundings, and that goes an awful long way to allow that young person to start to think about how they can realise their potential and maximise on their talents. So of course you've got to deal with the symptom, you know, the end result, the outcome of why a young person is homeless or lost sleeper. But I think prevention is where we need to be. And I think if we start to think more about how we can invest in mental health service and provision in this country, we'll go an awful long way towards tackling the issue of why a lot of our young people are homeless and lost sleeping.
Thank you, Ashley. We are going to be having mental health as one of the topics for this afternoon. So Jerry, I'm going to ask you a practical question. You know, are you going to open your home? Because is that an answer? Give a person a room to the homeless situation?
I think the reality check to try and deal with that is poverty's been with us forever. It's not a new concept, and I think there's been successive generations has tried to get to grips with poverty. But if we look at some of the root causes, I think the people who control the resources and have acquired the power are not philanthropic like they used to be. And I think society today is a lot more frightened, perhaps a lot more nervous, and I think also perhaps less generous with what they have. And to deal with your question directly, it was a question I was going to pose actually. You know, we talk about trying to address the issues of homelessness. I think there are lots of factors that make that a challenge, and I'm not sure whether we can do it justice without a soundbite. But I think if the truth were known, how many of us would open our homes? I have opened my home to the homeless and have stolen stuff from me. So I have to think twice about would I do it again, and that's also a reality. So I think going forward, it is something that we have to be determined to address. But I think the people who are in positions of power, they need to be held more accountable for the redistribution of wealth.
Thank you for that. We are tight on time, so just the final word from you, and then we'll be opening up to one of the guests who had a question to speak on it. But Sharon, you did want to come back in very briefly on that, and then we'll have the question from Estella Edwards from the Melting Pot, future Melting Pot.
So I think when we're talking about homelessness in its entirety for people that are going through or that are going to go through it, I think ultimately, because I hear what Joe says about compassion, but no matter what we do, our secondary thinking, we have to get this in our mindset, is to try and help them out of that situation. So not just, you know, to feed them on that night, yes, that's great, but it's about, as organisations, it's working with us to know, so we know what you can provide and what is being provided as services, so you know where to signpost people to. I think it's when you're giving people as members of the public, if you've got a smartphone, there's an app called StreetLink, And what we say is, if you download Streamlink, if you see someone you perceive to be a rough sleeper, report it, because it means that the report goes back to the space and we can get outreach out there. So I think it has to be about getting them out of the situation, not keeping people comfortable in a difficult situation. And finally, in terms of all of the topics that we're talking about, particularly with homelessness, there are two different types of factors that push people into crisis. One is individual factors, so that could be you're exposed to domestic violence, it might be drug and alcohol or something like that, just come out of prison. And the other one is structural, which is poor housing supply, the education system, welfare reform. It's all of those things that are connected to policy. The more that one individual has stacked up against them, the more likely they're going to fall into some form of crisis. Now, for me, within churches and in communities, we have so much resource because we have so many people with so many different skills. And it's about working out which is the best skill and where to use it. Rough sleeping is the visual part of homelessness. We have over 2,000 families without who are in temporary accommodation and children that are living in temporary accommodation, families that need support. So it's what can we do for those people as well, based on the skill-based knowledge that we've got in our communities.
Thank you for that, Sharon. Thank you, yes. And it is about a little bit of the twofold, the fear, having the experience that Derek's had, and I'm sure probably one or two in the audience have had when you've helped somebody out, but yet at the same time being a backstop for some of them. Estella Edwards, the future melting pot, has a question for us. If you'd like to stand as well, Estella, thank you.
Thank you. Just adding to what was talked about, the faith groups, that we've noted through our research that there are many faith groups and local groups that are doing some fantastic work with rough sleepers. Rough sleepers defined as people sleeping in shops, front ways, etc. So some of this work has saved people's lives. So my question, Dr. Jo Aldred, is why do you think that some of the local groups are not feeding into the services that can turn some of this around? So it's kind of adding on to what Sharon has just talked about, the services available, but there's not that feeding from some of the faith groups.
I think that's a fair charge. There's no question that churches tend, by their nature, I think, to be rather insular. And by insular, I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way, but tending to look after the affairs of their members and the community that tends to be close to them. And it takes a certain amount of moving away from that survivalist mentality and mode to reach beyond just the needs of your particular community. So one of the challenges is that churches need to be more outward looking. Bishop Wayne talked about having a plan. Well, part of the plan is never going to be to replace the local council or national government with big macro housing policy, but it can be to find out what local council is about, what are the strategies in our area, and how can we feed into that. I'll give you a classic example. When I became one of the presidents of Housing Justice, one of the reasons they wanted me on board was to try nationally and bring the black and white Pentecostal churches more into action in terms of what they are trying to do. I then tried to point them towards one or two churches in the Birmingham area that I know who are doing things, whether it be soup kitchen or some form of shelter, respite facility. And it was very difficult to get a couple of churches that I can think of with one name to link up with what was happening structurally. And I think it's largely because churches tend to be inward looking in that way. So they will do things for the people, churches through a partner to do things. But looking out, it takes a particular kind of vision of the world that goes beyond, if you're thinking of my white crumine, this whole, to see that you are not the whole, you are part of the whole, and therefore part of your responsibility is to look beyond your own four walls. And I would agree, there is not enough of that.
Thank you very much for that. And Estella, thank you, Bishop Joe. And Estella, again, just to give you a little bit of background, the Future Melting Pot is a group that has as one of their key areas that they're looking to. She herself has been a social worker and is serving now as the head of vulnerable adult support at a host of associations. So thank you very much for your question there, Estella Edwards. Let's move on to our second question of the evening. This is a question that has already been brought up in terms of mental health. Ashley, you talked a little about it there. And I'll put this question to Derek in a way for you just to start some of this conversation. It's estimated that 1 in 4 people living here in the UK will experience a mental health problem in their lifetime. The statistic has been prevalent for some years, with some experts expecting the stats to rise to 1 in 3 people. Why do you think this number around mental health issues and problems is increasing?
My starter is I actually don't believe the statistics. And I don't believe the statistics because I think there are a lot more people who have mental health than the statistics portray. I think everybody has a mental health challenge at some stage in their life. So I think there are maybe certain aspects. I have strong links with mental health in my own family. My younger brother has schizophrenia. My other brother who died under sad circumstances, my sister also had mental health, serious mental health issues. So I know a lot about mental health. I think one of the challenges we have in society is I think everybody has an opinion. Nowadays, everybody has to have an opinion. When I grew up, a bit old now, but when I was growing up in the 60s, and I know I look good, but there's a little age there. There you go. I never saw the prevalence of mental health as I do today. We used to manage it differently in our communities. There seemed to be different ways of dealing with things. When I was younger, if I had a fallout with somebody, I'd have a fight in the playground and we shake hands after and be friends. Nowadays, if I have a fight, police come, they're going to arrest my mom for abusing me. And all kind of things happen. So society has created an environment where things are not managed the way families used to manage them. Of course, families will need help at times and extra support. But I think with the free society that we live in, the consequence is that there's an abdication almost of responsibility of families, whether it's to discipline the children or we expect somebody else to take responsibility for our loved ones. So I think by releasing and letting people have freedom of expression, have freedom of choice, and all these things, which I do accept is important in a free society, I think the unforeseen consequences are that many people who were properly supported by some of those structures are now left to fend for themselves, and I think that's a really sad situation.
And so therefore that leads me nicely to a question again for, I know that Derek, you are also a minister, but let me direct it to Joe and to Wayne. Because a key thing that lots of people say is, as a church, in particular Black majority church, it feels as though talking about mental health problems is taboo, because you should just pray and be healed and move on. And so, is that a true picture of how the church sees mental health issues? Either way, what Wayne or Joe? All right, Wayne, I'll go with you for you to. Well, I'm doing it more so, you're coming from an international, you've just shared a statistic that in South Africa, it's 2.3 million who are in poverty, homeless. Therefore, the statistics, it doesn't take a genius to realise that there must be a mega number of people struggling with their mental health. How does the church in South Africa respond to it? Do they do the classic thing of, we'll pray and move on?
I think that most of the believers here that are here tonight believe that praying and laying on of hands will heal the problem, or deal with the problem. But by a show of hands, how many of you know that that's not the reality? Can you talk to us? This is why they say interactive. Can you lift your hand if you believe that? We have a divided audience right here. There are various issues that we have to deal with when we talk about mental issues, because it's a range of circumstances that is so diverse in its essence. It deals with issues from what kind of home you come from, where you live, the kind of environment you are exposed to. It's quite unique, and thank God I don't have mental issues. Well, some say I do, but I don't believe them. Is that I was exposed to seeing the first individual being brutally stabbed right in front of my eyes, and he was practically hacked to death. And at a young age, a child should not be exposed to that kind of thing that happens right in front of your eyes. I was 8 years old when I first saw somebody burn alive. I don't know if that's proper English, but be that as it may, they put some petrol on him and torched the man alive. Those kind of things, fills a young man's heart. It's issues that never leaves you. The church in its essence then, for many of us, have become the escape that we run to that deals with some of those issues. The statistics will show that we might not have all the successes of that, but if we can have a closer collaboration of all stakeholders to work together to deal with the issue. The church is one component, and we should not leave the church out of that component, but society, communities, etc., should work coherently to deal with that problem. Because it's a variety of issues that we deal with. And the church should continue by praying, because it's one aspect that helps.
Yes, please, yes. And I know this question, so if the audience can look around for me and help me out, I'll make sure we go to the audience.
And of course, there's a link between mental and hopelessness. One of the stats that I had fed me by some of the people I talked to before tonight, whether this is universal or not, there's a report that 44% of homeless people have been diagnosed with a mental health condition. So there is massive hope. It touches all of us. The sister who follows me in my very large family has chronic mental illness and has done for many years. So it's very close to my heart. I think the statistics which Derek was questioning, 1 in 4, that's for the general population. I read somewhere a report that said that amongst Black people in this country, it's 1 in 2. So if there's 200 of us in here right now, 100 of us, well, let me leave it there. So it is a chronic problem. I think we have tried to address this. There's no question that when I was growing up, there was a lot of mad people and girls in my church not well. Speaking in tongues, some of them just crazy. And we would pray for them and send them home, and they would come back next week and maybe they try to respond in the church, and they like that approach space. My wife works in mental health. She runs courses. I have been on one of those mental health courses. But then the courses are run now that can help us to get a better understanding of mental health issues, so that we can minister appropriately to people's needs within churches. And I was one of those who were pushing very hard. I worked with the Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Trust. I've been one of the champions in some years. So I continue to do that. I would just want to say, in terms of what the churches need to do, we need to be better equipped with knowledge of mental health challenges and how best to approach it. I think prayer is always important. But one of the things about our community is that we tend to turn for help late. And very often by the time we get into the service, people are holding us down, injecting us, and giving us medication. whereas generally, other people are offered talks and everything, for example. So I think we need to be earlier, and churches need to be proactive in recommending that to get stuff like this.
Thank you, Joe. I know there's a question in the audience. I am going to come to the panelists. We've got Ashley, Ophelia, Sharon wants to say something, but yes, young man, if you'd like to stand for us.
My question to the panel is about two different experiences in the church. One set of thought emotion, the second set of reverence, because in the community, the church run is unable to facilitate. For me, that's what I said, that was what I wanted. The church should be more of a robust children. The question is,
Thank you for that. That's in relation to the church. I appreciate the question. Obviously, it may have a knock-on effect in terms of mental health, but it's a question that we could be thinking of and come back to, as you said, running away from the church, running away from people, and at the same time having an emotional experience. Ashley, I know you wanted to say something. You alluded to it earlier on about the link to mental health and young people. So, go ahead.
It's actually an answer to the question that you just posed there. I think there are many reasons why people develop mental health issues, particularly young people. I think the main reasons why young people in particular develop mental health issues relates to perceived lack of opportunity or actual lack of opportunity, not being able to respect society, not feeling respected, and not feeling wanted. And I think the church has a vital role in the sense of being an incubator for creativity and innovation. Let me explain. So, of course, we come here, we pray, we listen to the gospel, and that's fine, that's fantastic. But what we often fail to realise is that church has long been an emphasis of that community. You talk about an institution, you talk about developing a centre, a heartbeat of our community, the church, by and large, has been. So what should we do as far as the institution of the church start thinking about how can we engender technology, how can we start to bring in job fairs and bring companies to the church to talk to our congregations about their aspirations, their desires and their futures. In a sense, being the model of the church would be purely a place where people come together and develop their spiritual senses, and more about developing economic institutions. And I think if young people saw the church in that light as being more than just a place to come to pray, and a place to talk to one another and to feel whole, but more about an opportunity, a place to think about economics,
and so, yes.
That's what we can do moving forward.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you're saying let's think differently to what we do now, but the mental health issue is still there. We've got a question from there, and also can I encourage you as well that if you're hashtagging, can you do hashtag Loud360, share this information as well on all the social media. I think we haven't heard from you for a while. You're a young woman who's championing the needs of these marginalised groups, and mental health would fall into that. The stats which Joe Hackney has shared again, and we know it. I have it as well within my family. Even I actually am having therapy, and so I know the need for mental health support. But what are you hearing from your peers or those who we say are millennials when it comes to understanding mental health issues?
So the four main issues are drugs, and that's an excessive use of cannabis or marijuana. And it's seen as an okay thing, but if you're not educated as to what that can do to your brain, chronologically, and also if you're already on the spectrum of having that mental health illness and not knowing that, these drugs of cannabis and marijuana can actually increase your mental health even more. We have a second one, which is trauma. And growing up, if you have a trauma, that can actually trigger and start mental health. Third one being gang culture. You have been followed, or you have been have experienced some experiences previously in terms of gang culture that's made. I think I remember one guy saying that he stayed in his house all the time because he didn't want to. He was too scared to leave his house due to people that he was affiliated with, etc. And the third one being the most biggest one being social media. And social media has also contributed to mental health. People feeling that they have to look or be a certain way, having anxiety. And I think in terms of the church, what we can do is create support groups. I think we also see it as a community, but we also need to create small support groups in each church that people can go and talk to. We have people that are experience in these areas of mental health. We have doctors, we have PhD, people that have got PhDs in this area, and I think if we use our gifts and our talents and our abilities to help young people, that's how we can see change.
Thank you. I know we haven't got much time on this question, but there was one, we had somebody over there. You've got, oh right, and then we've got one there. Thank you. Chanel, yes.
Well, I guess it's a comment and a question. Being a psychiatric focus and working in the mental health field myself, and being a believer, I do think it's really interesting how the church views mental health sometimes. And the little survey that Bishop Wayne just done, like who believes church is the solver of mental health, and some people put their hands up. It's interesting because I think just like we have physical health problems, we'd go to the doctor, and that's fine in the church. And just like we have mental health problems, we should do the same thing. We should seek support, we should seek medication, we should seek therapy, whatever is needed, just the way that we do physical health is the same way that we should do mental health. And I think my question, I guess, to the whole panel and to Ophelia maybe, just as from a youth perspective, is how can we work together, or how can the church be unified in their response to what is mental health and what type of support we can get? Because if some churches are saying, let's just pray about it, let's just get deliverance about it, but then other churches are saying, yes, get support. I know my church personally, we do have counsellors that come in and we are quite proactive in that area, but we're not unified in that area. So how can we be unified as a community to see things?
I'll put that to you, Sharon, as a counsellor, and I would say as a church person, but obviously experienced in that. What is that part of the problem? I know we mentioned it a little bit with homelessness, is the fact that, and Joe's also said the church does not choose to get involved in what's structurally going on around mental health issues.
I think sometimes we give the church a hard time because we use it in such a broad context, and actually there's lots of different churches that do a lot of things around mental health, and there's a lot of individuals who are professionals like yourself in the church who contribute to these things. So there's a lot of that going on, and I think sometimes we need to share that knowledge across churches and where the good examples are. I know that for myself, my son, and if anybody knows my son is incredible. But he went through a stint where his mental health really suffered. Now, the people that I phoned first were all people from churches, and they were not from my church. I think Nathan was one of the first people that I phoned, and it was that support mechanism, it was the understanding, and it is about the thing of building your knowledge around what the issues actually are, so that you can connect to that. So I think that's really, really important, and being available. But I think the most thing that the church can do, and it's not to say the church, individuals in the church can do, is be open-minded to other people's perspectives and the lost. Because sometimes we get so consumed in the saved, and we forget about the lost. And actually it's the broken. So if people don't feel that you're accessible, or that you're judging them, or that you're treating them a certain way, they're not going to be open with you. So I think it's about individuals taking responsibility and also sharing the knowledge and having that understanding of the issues that we have.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I know I'm going to finish you, but time is again running. We've got a quick response there, 2 responses from the audience. If we just take those before we move on to our question, our final question, and one over to my left.
No, it wasn't a response.
Oh, just a comment.
It was a question to the panel.
Okay.
Question to the panel is, does any of the panel feel that mental health was taught to us from parents who wasn't diagnosed back in the 80s?
Yeah. So repeat that for me again.
So I'm saying, does the panel think that mental health was taught to us from our parents who wasn't diagnosed, when they didn't have them kind of the doctors that we got now?
Okay, so more or less saying our generations previous, was it because they weren't spoken, they didn't know how to speak about mental health, that impacted on how we're responding now? I know we're tight for time, but Ophelia, in little that you know about probably a grandparent or a grandaunt, would you say that's why young people struggle to come forward around their mental health?
I agree. I know a young male who was in depression and had mental health, and his parents was basically, it was a simple don't speak, don't. It was a taboo subject in his family, and because he didn't know how to speak to his parents, he then had to find other sources, which is alcoholism, drugs, whatever that was, because it was a tradition of them is, if there's a problem, you don't make it known, carry on, you do your life, you go to work, you go to school, and that's how it lives. Don't let no one see your problems, because you, especially in black males, you'll be seen as weak, you'll be seen as, you're meant to be the provider, the breadwinner, and if you have a mental issue, then the whole household breaks down. So a father can't see or show no weakness, that means my son can't do it either, and that's, it becomes a domino effect.
Thank you for that, Philly. I know, yes, I know from the panel, we haven't got much time. I had a question to my left. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sabina Levy. 16 to 24-year-olds are experiencing mental health. Some may be due to domestic violence in relationships. What can we do to educate young people about relationships and about abusive relationships to stop the cycle from continuing until the next generation?
Thank you for that. What can we do? Who would feel, Ashley, you want to come back, and what can we do to help young people feel that they can have a decent, an understanding of a decent relationship?
I think part of the solution is better education in schools around healthy relationships and what it means to grow up as a young man or a young woman in this world. I think a lot of emphasis is put on sex education, which is fine, but I don't think enough to put into mental well-being and how to actually conduct yourself once you grow up. So I think more emphasis and investment should be placed into how young people should conduct themselves in relationships as they grow up.
Thank you for that. So let me say, Wayne, you want to say one thing on that?
Yeah, I think that most of us that are believers here know that some come from dysfunctional families, come from dysfunctional structures. And once a child is exposed to certain things, it just automatically becomes part of our lifestyle. For example, in SA, almost 54% of our youth is unemployed. And so you deal with all those mental issues because you cannot provide for you or your family. And there are certain things that is generationally passed over because of what children were exposed to. And the young man is right. If it's not detected earlier, we're dealing with the generation now because we have not dealt with the father. And so those socioeconomic issues are real issues. There are some young men that are sitting here from a church perspective, that their issues is not just their own personal issue, it's carrying baggage.
Yeah, very true. We've also got one more on this. We've got our main question coming up, but Michaela Jones from the organisation Uprising. There should be a question or a point that's going to be put across from her. I think, unfortunately, after Michaela, we won't have time. We're going to have to move to our next question. But welcome, Michaela. You're a young person that's featured on the, has been shortlisted for the 2018 Birmingham Awards Young Achiever, as well as being listed on the Birmingham Live Under 30s list. So, well, congratulations to you. So just your question or your comments on mental health, in particular for young people.
Thank you. The question I actually had originally had to answer with this really wonderful conversation. It's really good to hear so many people talking about mental health and young people mental health. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their contribution to that. But I think my question was kind of adapted to the trauma and the re-trauma that young people see and they witness, whether it's their friends, their family, their experiences, social media access, institutional racism, all of these things that play a part in young people's lives to affect their mental health in all those different ways. Adding to the fact that there's this kind of stigma around asking for help, I'm curious about what the panelists think are the practical actions that we can do to help break that stigma and stop this facade of like, you have to be this strong black woman, you have to be this strong black man all the time, and how vulnerability is not a weakness.
Thank you for that, Michaela. Thank you. I know we've already touched on it, but Joe, in light of some of the conversations we've had over the years, in particular when you were presenting Chat Back as well, I always remember you saying, I'm looking for the practical solution. What's the a practical solution. And I know that one of the things that we talked about or had is because we don't take the business out of street. Is that why we have such a high ratio of issues?
Well, I think, I mean, you know, Nick and I have been interviewing people for many, many years, and you pick up a lot from listening to young people talk. A couple of things come to mind. The first thing is to talk about racism and living in a racist society where racism is structural. And I was talking today about what is it that makes it possible for the most ignorant racist to scratch their armpits, make monkey noises, and somehow reflect that on me. And so the most intelligent black person can be reduced to shreds by the most inarticulate white person who's a racist. All they have to do is throw a banana at you and you just crumble. So there's a psychological hurdle to get over in our minds. A problem which I was born in Jamaica, and I came here at 15, so I've lived here for a very long time, so 50 years. And I see in black people who are born in this country a certain uneasiness about their existence that I and many other people I know who are born in the Caribbean or in Africa don't seem to suffer from. So I think that's one challenge that young people have, the psychological impact and effect of living in a situation where you have imbibed the idea of inferiority, whether we like it or not, whiteness is great and so on. That's one challenge. The other, which I would say is a practical thing, by the way, I think you can transcend that. That's my point. But I think the practical thing is for those of us who are older, and particularly in the church, there's a whole heap of secrets that people are holding down in church and in life, not just in church, where we are therefore not open. And the conversations we have are held in that context of unopenness and hiddenness. So I can tell you, as a pastor for many years, when I was a pastor, which I gave up about 22 years ago, and as a pastor, I know that there were some families, for example, where, let me be straight, incest had taken place in the family. And it was held down, covered over, but just certainly that never get talked about. So my point is, I think one of the things that older people can help young people with is by being open ourselves, sharing the struggles that we have experienced, sharing some of the failures that we have had, and the case of how we got over, if indeed we have got over. I think that will help young people to open up a lot more themselves.
I think that you were doing some nodding, and I know probably Ashley, Derry. I know, apologies, I'm trying to get to all of you, but as a young person, obviously similar age group to Michaela there, would you agree that that's a key thing? The older heads do not open up, and therefore that's adding pressures onto younger people.
Definitely, and I've actually got testimonials from people that said this would actually help. I think it's seen an example that I'm not alone, and that there was other people out there who've experienced similar experiences just like me. It's having that realization that I am not on this planet alone. I'm not experiencing this all on my own. It's someone who's got a fabulous career, well, not even fabulous career, but someone who has gone through life okay, and they have had children and they've been married and they have experienced life, and it's not the end of the world. Just knowing that there's someone out there that is just similar to them, I think that would help a lot, and that can be done through schools. People can come in through schools. It can be done on ads, on social media, on talks, on videos. Just having a simple forum that just experiences.
Thank you for that. I am conscious of time, and thank you for those who responded. I've even had one thing. I feel like we are really truly interacting. I have a message that's come through as well on text that saying it is drilled into us from an early age that what happens at home stays at home. We in church are trying to help people, but cannot, because we cannot get people to open up. That's coming, in fact, from Pastor Yvonne Brooks, that was possibly the case for so many. And as usual, we start getting warmed up. Everyone starts going, and I'm conscious that we need to stick to time. So if it's a brief comment on that, then please stand and share. Thank you.
Everyone here. My name is Dawn Kroll, and I'm a service user of mental health. My career is fashion designer, and I have had depression for over a period since I've been in this country. My mental health came from trauma background. And when pressures of life reaches me, I had a breakdown. I'm always trying to tell you that it's fixable. Our brain is flesh and muscle. And just like anything else in the body, it can get wear and tear. And today, we have new research breakthrough that really assist us to have normal lives and live our healthy normal lives. The brain is like when your hand broken, you know, it's muscle and it's flesh, so it get wear and tear. So don't be frightened that if you ever come up in a bad situation in life and you need some help, don't be afraid to seek it, that it can be fixable. And there is healing in the power of Jesus' name.
Thank you for that positive early on. Appreciate you sharing and being so open and honest with us on that score. Thank you everybody again for being here with us this evening. We're having this panel discussion, a town hall experience. Question time is in its approach, looking at some of the issues that we're going to talk about. And this next one, I'm sure many of you will have your own thoughts and opinions. If we can, we'll get around as many of you as we can. But the question that I want to put to the panel, and I'm going to probably ask Ashley if you would start in response to this question, is around the topic that's been so much in our conversation in the media. We're hearing about knife crime and other statistics, in particular the fatalities here in Birmingham. Now, according to a report by BBC, 100 people have been fatally stabbed here in the UK in the year so far. 8 of those 100, and possibly higher than that, have been here in the West Midlands. What do you think are some of the reasons that people are resorting to knife crime? And I know there's other questions underlying that. How much is some of that to do with gang culture, or young people, or even older people grooming others to get involved? And is in line of the work that you're doing, and Derek, you can probably follow on from this, is some of the issue the fact that we as a community have probably indirectly supported the black on black violence that has taken place. So I know there's a lot packed into there, and our runners are going to be ready to come back at you. Nathan, we're also going to hear from you as well with the question and the comments. But Ashley, that statistic, 8 in 100 here in the West Midlands.
You know, you hear those statistics and your heart just weeps. You know, what people sometimes don't always realise is that when a young person loses their life, the knock-on effect for the family, community, and society is humongous. It's more than just that one individual. And you know, young people have so much talent and abilities, and for it to be taken so tragically through a senseless act, would be through a knife wound or a gun wound, it's just something you can't really put into words. I've spoken to many parents and loved ones of young people who've been deceased through senseless acts. It never gets easier, that's for sure. I think one of the main reasons why young people get involved in these acts is due to adverse child experiences. So if you don't have a father in the household, if you've been abused, whether it be sexually or emotionally or mentally, that can lead to knock-on effects of not having self-worth, not having high self-esteem, not having confidence, and therefore losing the ability to have the foresight to recognise that we all have a point and a reason and a being here on this earth. And I think what we need to do is start to use our social and human capital that is here in our communities to really reach out to our young people and let them know how wanted they are. You spoke a moment ago about mental health and the importance of reinforcement and letting people know that they are wanted and loved. I think we need to do more about that and around that for our young people here. And because they don't feel loved, because they don't feel respected, it's leading to some of the issues we see in our region.
Derek, I wanted to come to you with regard to sometimes when the cases are coming out in the news and how they get handled, and has that compounded some of the response we get. But I'm going to go straight to Nathan Dennis, who is one of the region's dynamic leaders when it comes to entrepreneurship, but also working with young people, doing particular programs across the country and to support knife crime. And you've always, I think, Nathan, been honest enough to say that you came from a life where many would say was, gang related. So share with us a little what your comments and then the question that you may have wanted to put.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
First, I just want to say, I think like tonight is absolutely fantastic for me personally, like I said, to prayer. Because I think in the 21st century, 2019, we as who are church members need to be having more conversations like this with counsellors, with doctors, with bishops, with all the society, deputy police crime commissioner. Because for sometimes as a Christian, if I'm honest, it gets quite frustrating. Because I think we can do fantastic events, we do concepts, we do, event after event, but what are we doing strategically to make a difference? And I think this is a fantastic initiative. And I just want to salute it. If you join me just to celebrate this moment. I know we're struggling for time, but question time is on every week for a reason, because people really do like to talk. And when you get a group of people that haven't had the opportunity to talk in a long time, everyone wants to speak. But in terms of knife crime, we're facing a mad crisis within society. We work closely with Ashley's office. And even just in a news report just for the West Midlands, it says like in March, there was over like 99 stabbings in an 8-week period. That's in the West Midlands. There was a report that said last year, in 2018, in the West Midlands, this is not nationally, that we had over 690 children under the age of 17 who were attacked and threatened with a knife